Hey there guys, I'm SonicGhost and welcome back to some more Let's Play Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Last time around, we took a look at a lot of extra little things about Majora's Mask between different version differences here and a bunch of different glitches. But in today's episode, we're going to be focusing on one key thing, the Fierce Deity Mask. This is a mask we got when we were up in the moon, and there's one caveat to this mask. We can only use it in boss fights. But it doesn't just limit you to the final boss fight against Majora himself. We can go back to the 4 dungeons we've already explored and utilize the Fierce Deity's Mask there. So that's what we're going to be doing in today's episode. We're going to be rematching every single boss in this game, this time around only utilizing the Fierce Deity's Mask, unless there is a weird stipulation with it. And this goes for both the N64 and 3DS versions of Majora's Mask. We'll be taking a look at basically all 9 fights in the game. The 4 dungeons basically making 8 fights, and then the Majora fight, which is the same between both versions, making a total of 9 bosses. I hope you enjoyed today's boss rush. Starting off here, we're in Woodfall Temple. Gonna just go ahead, fly our way over to the said dungeon, and rematch our first boss of the day, Old Dawa. I'm not going to be utilizing any Chateau Amani in my system for this, so we're going to just be going with the raw power of Fierce Deity, utilizing our magic meter. So that way you can see just how much magic the Fierce Deity's Mask really uses. So let's make our way to the lair of the temple's boss and fight Odawa once again. Now that we're in the boss chambers, let's go ahead and equip ourselves our Fierce Deity's Mask. Transforming into the big boy himself, let's go ahead and walk forward to trigger the fight. Now, we already had kind of an easy time against Odawa here in our first visit to Woodfall Temple, but let's just say the fight just became a lot more trivial for us. So I'm just going to go ahead and target this guy and start shooting with more sword beam. He will block him, but when he jumps in the air, that's your chance to strike. Just wail on him with your sword beam, and he goes down in mere seconds. Yeah, this guy wasn't really much of a fight. Kind of sad, but again, this is supposed to be your first boss in the game, so it is kind of a trivial fight. But yeah, that's Fierce Deities here. Let's go ahead and fight Odawa once again, this time around in the 3DS version. Alright, so we're back here in the boss chambers of Woodfall Temple, this time around the 3DS version. So let's go ahead and put on our Fierce Deity Mask and fight Odawa here once again. So we remember when we were here the first time around, when we fought Odawa in the 3DS version, we noticed that things were slightly different in this fight. Odawa now has an eye in the back of his forehead, and it does change up your strategy quite a lot, but not necessarily for Fierce Deity Link. Our strategy for fighting Odawa is going to basically be the same. Any opening we see, that is our chance to strike. So now when this guy's dancing around, I'm going to get behind him and just wail on him with my sword beams. When Odawa's in the air, that's also your chance to hit him with sword beams. And just keep on wailing on the guy, and eventually Odawa will go down with really not much of a fight. Since Odawa's the first boss in the game, it doesn't matter if you're on N64 or 3DS, this guy goes down extremely fast using the Fierce Deity form. He doesn't stand a chance against our sword beams. But now with Odawa defeated, let's go ahead and fight our next boss here in the game, Got. Alright, so we're here in the boss's chambers in Snowhead Temple, so we're ready to go ahead and fight Got once again. Go ahead and unthaw him with our fire arrows and equip our Fierce Deity's Mask. So, Odawa, being the first boss of the game, was a pretty easy fight, no matter if you're playing the N64 or 3DS versions of the game, but Got was supposed to be the first boss that really started to challenge the player. And with the Fierce Deity's Mask, it definitely does. We can't really chase this guy down all that easily with this giant form of Link, so we're gonna just have to roll around the arena until we run into this big old goat. So basically I'm just gonna roll here. That's the fastest form of movement with Fierce Deity, which is how big he is. His rolls are just a lot faster. And here I'm listening to where exactly our boss is going, because sometimes God can turn around. I'm just kind of waiting for him to come to me at this point. Sounds like he just stops somewhere. Who knows where exactly. Guess I'm gonna move over a little bit. Oh, he's behind me. Get ready. lock on and just shoot him with the sword beams. Just wail on him with the sword beams at this point. That's all we can do. We took away a decent amount of his health from the looks of things, but he's not dead just yet. So I'm going to roll around the arena once again, trying to catch back up to God. And I think I'm close. Oh, yes, I am. I'm close. And unfortunately, he threw me away like a pile of garbage. That's what he thinks of me, I guess. So let's make our way back around the arena and try to fight this guy once again. God's not really the easiest boss to fight, in my opinion, with the Fierce Deity's Mask. Sure, you may have a projectile, but the projectile itself, you have to be locked onto the boss to really take full advantage of it. You have to be Z-targeting and use the sword beams in general, but even then, the sword beams, they can't really be controlled, so the best way to control the sword beam is to just have them automatically lock onto its target. So that's why I feel that the GOT boss battle is a lot harder with Fierce Deity compared to any of the bosses in the game, in fact. Fierce Deity just wasn't really designed all that well for this fight in particular, but wailing on the guy will do a lot of damage as long as you keep on spamming the button. And I think he's just about dead from the looks of things, so a few more hits for Fierce Deity and that should take the boss down. Try to catch up with him once again, lock on, sword beam him, and if we hit him enough times, that will do it. Luckily, we only have to catch up with the guy 3 times in a row, so basically only 3 cycles of hits. But with that, God is defeated. One of the harder bosses, in my opinion, in the game to fight, and especially with the Fierce Deity, he becomes one of the hardest fights in the game in general. So I don't really recommend using this form, but it is something you can do. So let's find our warp panel here, and fight God once again, this time around in the 3DS version. Alright, so back here in the boss's lair in the 3DS version for Snowhead Temple. So let's go ahead, take out our fire arrows, unthaw our GOT friend, and put on our Fierce Deity's Mask. So just like with Oldawa, GOT here was changed in the 3DS version to be a slightly different fight, but the Fierce Deity version of this fight isn't really that different compared to its N64 counterpart. Even with the new eye in the back of GOT here, things are going to play out pretty similar. So once GOT makes his way around the arena, we're going to do a 180 and try to cut him off. So at this point, I'm just going to roll around here and wait for GOT to catch up to where I'm at. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead, get me some magic ready, get my sword beams all charged up, and start wailing on GOT. Couple sword beams, and now we'll go ahead and stun the guy, revealing the eye on his back. Now from here, I just want to go ahead and get close enough so I can lock onto the eye and just wail on him with more sword beams. Keep on doing this, and you can stun the guy once again and do more damage. You can kind of get GOT here in a stun lock if you're good enough here with your sword beam attack. So we can do a lot of damage really fast against this boss. At this point, since we didn't get a good stun lock, I'm going to wait for GOT to come to me, and just going to wail on him with more sword beams, stunning him once again. I catch back up to the guy, find his eye, and just wail on him with some more sword beams. If I do this enough, I'll stun him once again, and just keep on wailing. Even got him around the corner. That was a really good attack. I'm gonna catch back up to you, hit you with more sword beams, and that's the fight. GOT here, as you can see, basically has the same strategy as his N64 counterpart using the Fierce Deity's Mask. The hardest part about this fight is keeping up with the guy, because Fierce Deity on his own, while faster than human-like, is still not the fastest form here in the game. So Fierce Deity kinda can take some time here to catch up with the big dude. But now with GOT defeated, let's fight our next boss here in the game, Georg. Alright, so we're here in the boss chambers, ready to fight Georg in Great Bay Temple. So let's go ahead and jump down the hole here with our Fierce Deity's Mask equipped, and get ready to fight this giant fish. So, to me, Georg is kind of on the same scale as GOT was back in Snowhead, but not as difficult to fight with the Fierce Deities. So, in my opinion, this is probably the hardest boss out of the 5 main bosses here in Majora's Mask, and it's just because of the weird hitbox that Georg has in general. He's just kind of awkward to hit with the Zora mask, so it makes the fight a lot harder than it honestly needs to be. But with a Fierce Deity's Mask, we have a projectile at all times to shoot him with, making things a little bit easier on us. And since it's a much smaller arena compared to GOT, I find this fight is just easier in general. So just wailing away with our sword beams here, we can just lock on, just swing our sword, and just attack Georg. But sometimes the sword beams can't really reach correctly. So this is the hard part about the fight. trying to find the right angle in order to shoot your sword beams at Georg. So unfortunately, I have to let this guy go a little bit, shoot him again with a sword beam, and then line myself up better for another shot. 2 sword beams will trigger phase 2 here. So we're already in the second phase of this fight. It's going by pretty quick. Gonna wait for Georg to move around a little bit, shoot him with more sword beams, and just let him get right back up, just to immediately wail on him again with the sword beams. Get in a better position here with the sword. And there you go. Georg is defeated. Honestly, this is not that bad. I wouldn't say it's as easy as the Odawa fight, but at times it can be pretty close. It just kind of depends on where Georg is in the arena. Because of the awkward angle you're aiming down with your sword, this fight could be either pretty easy or pretty annoying, but not very difficult in my opinion. And now with Georg defeated, let's go ahead and fight him once again, now in the 3DS version. Alright, so back here in the boss chamber of Great Bay Temple here in the 3DS version. So let's go ahead, put on our Fierce Deity Mask, and jump down the hole here in the center. I love jumping down this hole while doing a jump slash because for some reason, Link just does a 180 in the air, and I don't know how he manages to do that. It's a cool little flashy move there, dude, but man, that's gotta take some willpower. And some manipulation of physics. Nice camera game. Fierce Deity Booty against Georg. Who's gonna win? Well, let's find out. Since this fight is pretty different here in the 3DS version, our strategy for once is actually going to be changing around using the Fierce Deity Mask. So we need to get close enough to Georg to target him. 2 laser beam shots from your sword will do enough damage to stun the guy. 1 sword beam or 1 jump attack will do enough damage for the eye for it to retract, and now you're back to square one in this process. This is pretty much your whole strategy for phase 1, and this can be a little luck dependent, just kind of based on where Georg is. If Georg stays close enough to the arena, then you can keep locked on, which makes things a lot easier. But if he stays far away, then things get a lot more complicated. So phase 1 here can already be kind of difficult, but now we're going to be moving into phase 2, and this is where things get even harder in my opinion. So what we need to do is we need to take off Fierce Deity Mask and immediately shoot down an ice arrow. Since we can shoot ice arrows in the water here, we can go ahead and make platforms wherever we want. And this is how we have to do the rest of the fight. We need to make our own platforms and constantly juggle our resources, our magic, and our footing here so we can fight Georg. Once we go in the water and we have no more platforms, Fierce Deity will be entirely useless in this fight. You would have to continue to fight using the Zora Mask. So this is honestly, in my opinion, not a good idea to do. For phase 2 of Georg, I don't recommend doing this at all, simply because there are just too many variables here that make this really, really difficult. You got all these platforms you gotta juggle with limited amount of magic if you didn't come in here with Chateau Imani. You got all the little fish that Georg spits out that can attack you when you're swimming in the water. You have a limited number of arrows that, yes, you may be able to restock with some of the pots down below, but you can still easily run out of arrows and run out of time to get back to your platforms while trying to get more arrows in the process. Not just that, but also Georg can rush towards these ice platforms and destroy them. And if he destroys all your platforms, then you have no solid ground, which means you have no way of fighting with the Fierce Deity's Mask. So, I hope I listed enough reasons of why this fight sucks using Fierce Deity. Just use the Fierce Deity Mask in phase 1, because once you get to phase 2, things just become just way too difficult and honestly too tedious in my opinion. The easiest way at this point for us to stun Georg is, while we could be locked on using the Fierce Deity laser beam attacks, it's hard to keep that lock on with Georg when he's moving around the water, so just shoot him with arrows. 5 arrows will stun Georg, hit him 3 times in the eye with your laser beam, and that will defeat Georg once and for all. So, as I said earlier, this fight is just not worth doing with the Fierce Deity Mask, or at least in phase 2. Phase 1, I can easily see a good point in using Fierce Deity because it does make things a lot easier. As long as you can keep your lock on to Georg, those sword beams can do a lot of damage really fast. But since you have to juggle all these platforms you have to make yourself using ice arrows, phase 2 is just next to impossible in my opinion. It's not impossible as we proved here today, but it's so difficult, I just recommend for phase 2, use your Zora Mask. But now with Georg defeated, let's go ahead and fight our next boss in the game, Twin Mold. Alright, so we're here in the boss's chambers in Stone Tower Temple, and there is one notable difference. We can't use the Fierce Deity's Mask here, but that's because we're technically in the dungeon itself still. So because of this doesn't count as a boss room. But as soon as we jump down into this portal, that will change. Now we're in a boss room, so now we can use our Fierce Deity's Mask. But let's be polite here and wait for Twin Mold to come out. Then we'll go ahead and put on the mask. So, when we were fighting Twin Mold the first time around, we showed out there's two different strategies of fighting this guy. Either using Giant's Mask or shooting him down with the bow. So, Fierce Deity's Mask is basically like shooting him with the bow. We just have to lock on from a distance and just wail away. Out of the 4 bosses here in Majora's Mask that we can refight with the Fierce Deity's Mask, this one is not fun, in my opinion. This is probably the worst out of the 4, the fight with Fierce Deity. Simply because you have to be locked on to do your damage. And there's no easy way of doing this. So, fortunately for us, we're kind of just at the mercy of just RNG in this fight. We have to hope that Twin Mold spawns in areas that we can lock on well enough, and that the other Twin Mold head we're trying to avoid at this point doesn't try to attack us, because I only want to focus on one of these two at the moment. I don't want both. So, yeah, this fight, not really that fun with this mask. But we're going to be doing it anyways because we want to fight all bosses in the game with the Fierce Deity. Not just 1 or 2. We're fighting them all. I can get close to the tail. I can go ahead and hit it. The best time to hit the tail from one of the 2 Twin Molds is when it's going down into the ground, because that's your best time to actually get a good shot in. You can sometimes get these guys in the air when they're flying around, but it kind of just depends on where they're going. So, reliably, the best way you're doing damage here is when they're retracting their tails. That's pretty much it. Or retracting them into the sand, not actually retracting them into their bodies. And imagine that. Take away one of your weak points. That'd be smart. There you go. Twin Mold number 1 is defeated. So, now we took out the blue Twin Mold. We gotta kill the red one. And honestly, I don't want to do this whole process again. So, let's utilize the equip swap glitch, utilizing the Giant's Mask in this area, and just kind of be a giant Fierce Deity. Something the game never intends for you to be able to do. One thing I want to mention about the equip swap glitch while I'm trying to get my Giant's Mask over my Deku Mask slot is that this is a frame-perfect trick, and the menus here in Majora's Mask run in 30 frames per second. So you have a 1/30th of a second to get this trick every time you attempt it. There we go. Go ahead and put on the Great Fairy Mask on our slot just to fill it. Transform into a giant Link, which will use our magic, but we want to just swap the Deku Mask down to C down so we can put on our other mask. Get interrupted in the process, but now let's put on the Fierce Deity's Mask, and now we're a giant Fierce Deity. But we can't really utilize our magic here, which is kind of the problem. So, to fix that, let's put on our Deku Mask, shoot a bubble, which will interrupt the magic flow, and now put on our Fierce Deity's Mask. Now, sword beams are back, baby! Let's wail on this Twin Mold, and now we have access to hidden Twin Mold with our sword, too. So this fight becomes a lot better. Utilizing glitches, I don't mind this fight with the Giant's Mask / Fierce Deity. This is a cool combination. Something I wish you could do normally, but without glitches, yeah, this fight kind of sucks with Fierce Deity's Mask. But there you go. Twin Mold is now defeated. So, yeah, out of the 4 fights that we can go back to with Fierce Deity, as mentioned earlier, this is my least favorite because it's so awkward to hit Twin Mold. Unless you become a giant Fierce Deity, utilizing the equip swap glitch and the Giant's Mask, which is definitely not dev intended, so yeah, this is still the worst out of the 4. It's cool with a glitch, but without it, it sucks. Put back on our Giant's Mask so we can actually leave the area, and let's fight Twin Mold once again, but this time in the 3DS version. Alright, so we're back here in the boss's chambers of Stone Tower Temple here in the 3DS version, and it's time for us to fight Twin Mold here once again. Out of the 4 fights in Majora's Mask here, Twin Mold is definitely the most different fight in Majora's Mask 3D. And because of this, our strategy for fighting Twin Mold this time around is going to be drastically different using the Fierce Deity's Mask. Out of the 4 fights, they really didn't think this one through with this mask, simply because there's not very much Fierce Deity can do in this fight. The best thing you can do at this point is try to hit the eyes with Fierce Deity's sword beams, but as you can see, there's no easy way of doing this. Because you can't aim the sword beams on your own, Fierce Deity Link has a very hard time hitting these eyes under the blue twin mold. So we need to actually use our bow and arrow if we actually want to have a good aim here. And then when the blue twin mold is stunned like this on the ground, this is our chance to transform back to Fierce Deity Link and attack the eye coming out of Twin Mold's mouth. So this is the strategy I recommend you do. Attack with Human Link to stun the blue twin mold, and then from there use Fierce Deity Link to do the damage on the eye. But that's not all we can do. Since we already have our Giant's Mask at this point, we can put on this mask and we can go ahead and fight the red twin mold now. But there's a catch. The red twin mold can't be killed right now when the blue one's on the field. We can do damage to the red twin mold, but he doesn't really stay on the field all too long, so we can't really fight red one right now. Instead, we can use our giant form to attack the blue twin mold and stun this guy. So with the Giant's Mask, you can go ahead and destroy those eyes on the underside of the blue twin mold, which will stun him and allow you to hit his eyeball. Or you can go ahead and use the Giant's form to just wail him around just like his red friend. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. This fight kind of just turned into Fierce Deity shows up for 5 seconds, and then Giant Link kind of does the rest. That's kind of the problem with this fight. Fierce Deity is not really useful here at all. Out of all 4 fights we've shown so far, Twin Mold was more designed in the N64 version to be attacked with whatever, while in the 3DS version, it's very scripted. Scripted down to a point where our new transformation just can't really get used, and that's sad. But we can attack the blue one with the giant form, which is something we haven't done at this point. So we are doing stuff a little bit differently, just not in the way we planned. So yeah, the rest of the fight, unfortunately, Fierce Deity can't do anything about. You can't hurt the red one no matter what attacks you use on the ground. You can only use your giant form here to attack the red twin mold, which is very, very unfortunate. So I guess at this point, we'll just finish up this fight here normally, and then we can move on to our next fight in the game. Go ahead and wail on the red twin mold here a little bit more, do some more damage, and catch up to him so we can deliver the final blow. Go ahead, grab his tail, spin around town, and slam the red one down. While we're going through the motions here, I didn't really have a good chance during the main Let's Play here to talk about how I feel about this fight. Because as mentioned earlier, this fight was drastically different in this version to a point where it's kind of a different beast entirely. And in my opinion, this is a really cool fight, and it does a lot of cool ideas that you kind of didn't really expect to see coming out of this remake. But at the same time, it makes it such a drastically different fight. It's kind of a polarizing one. A lot of people don't like this twin mold fight here in the 3DS version, simply because of just how different it is. While the Giant's Mask has a cool new form of it, where you can just go ahead and just attack with your fists and throw around twin mold like in Mario 64 with Bowser, this may be cool and all, but it is a very dragged out fight. In the original game, you can beat twin mold in a matter of a few minutes at the most, just because of how fast you were with giant form of Link swinging around the sword. In this game, since everything is on a scripted pattern, you're kind of at the mercy of the red twin mold here, just kind of cooperating with you. And that's kind of where this fight starts to fall apart. Especially when you can only attack the red twin mold when he's out and about in very specific ways. And then if you miss your timing, the red twin mold goes back underground, resetting his hit counter, and then you gotta start from square one. That's what makes this fight really bad, and just honestly, it's a little much. This fight is interesting, but at the same time, there's certain things they didn't need to do with this fight, like the hit stun resets when the guy goes back underground. We didn't need to have a long drawn-out period of hits, and if you don't rotate the control stick while throwing around the red twin mold here, you don't do as much damage, so the fight takes even longer. The game never really tells you that you can spin around twin mold by spinning the stick. It's something you have to figure out on your own as the player. So there's just a lot of weird quirks about this fight that it kind of makes it my least favorite fight out of the 4 here in Majora's Mask 3D, simply in principle. It's a cool idea, but the execution I think kind of fell flat on its face a little bit. Interesting fight, but I think they went a little overboard with their new idea here. And sadly, Fierce Deity pretty much only got 1 hit in the fight. He's very useless here. So the whole reason why we came had to defeat the purpose. I guess we'll put the mask on just to go over to the portal, just so Fierce Deity has some time in the sunlight. Let's get out of here and fight our final boss of the game, Majora's Mask. We made it to the moon, so we're ready to go ahead and confront our final fight here in the game. We're ready to go ahead, challenge Majora's Mask to a rematch. So let's go ahead and make our way over to the tree here in the center of the moon and talk to the kid wearing Majora's Mask. Will you play with me? Sure. Your masks don't look all that powerful to me. So, you'll play? Don't tell him about the power of Fierce Deity. Yes, we'll play. Well, shall we go? Masks don't look all that powerful. Have you seen the power of Fierce Deity, Link? He's gonna definitely destroy you. Let's go ahead and start this fight. So, Majora's Mask basically fights the same way in both the N64 and the 3DS versions of Majora's Mask. So, the 3DS version gets its time to shine here. We're going to be ending our boss rush, finding Majora here in the 3DS version. Here we go, the fight's about ready to begin. Phase 1, Majora's Mask. What we want to do is lock on with the mask and just shoot him with a sword beam. Instantly stuns him. Let's go ahead, jump attack the mask, and then from there, the remains of all 4 of the bosses that we fought are going to come out and play. So we did enough damage to already trigger the second portion of Phase 1. But now we just lock onto Majora once again, hit with another sword beam, jump attack again, and that's Phase 1. Because the sword beam can go through Majora's defenses, this phase is a joke with Fierce Deity Link. He can just bypass pretty much any difficulty with Phase 1. A lot can be said about Phase 2 here, Majora's Incarnation. The hardest part is going to be getting our first hit in, but once we get our first hit, this fight is going to go a lot easier for us. We do have the other masks here to worry about. If you don't want to worry about these masks anymore, just hit him with a sword beam. That'll destroy him instantly, and that's what I'm going to be doing, just to get rid of all these forms. Majora now is just spamming us with his laser attacks, and he's just going to do a little dance to show off. But we're not going to let that get us down. Hit him with a sword beam, that's going to stun Majora, and just wail on him at this point with more beams, and that's Phase 2. Once you stun off Majora's Incarnation, he can't really do much against you. But now it's time for the final phase of the fight. It's time to fight Majora's Wrath. Let's make sure this guy doesn't have any time to do anything. Hit him with some sword beams and just constantly do the same thing. We want to go ahead and put him in a stun lock. Hitting Majora with sword beams will instantly stun the guy, let us do damage. He'll jump around the field, hit with more sword beams, repeat the process, and Majora's Wrath will go down with no problem whatsoever. Fierce Deity Link takes any challenge out of this final boss battle, which is why I opted not to use this for our final fight against Majora in the main playthrough. But now that we defeated all the bosses, we can also use the Fierce Deity Link form outside of the boss fights, but with some limitations. Alright, so we're here in the swamp fishing hole, and if we take a look at our bottom screen, we can see I have the Fierce Deity Mask equipped, and it's actually usable here. So if I press the X button, I can put on my Fierce Deity Mask and transform the Fierce Deity Link. Don't really have my sword though, but hey, I can go fishing. So this is the only other area in the game that you can go ahead and transform into Fierce Deity Link. You can transform into Fierce Deity Link in both the swamp and ocean fishing holes here in Majora's Mask 3D. In the N64 version, this mask was limited to only boss battles, but in the 3DS version, since they allow you to use any of the transformations here in these fishing holes, they decided to throw the Fierce Deity form in the mix for some reason. Honestly, this form doesn't really do anything in the fishing holes, and in fact, in some ways, this might make things harder for you to fish. These fish might not actually see you as a friend, instead they may see you more as a foe, because the Fierce Deity Link is a scary looking form. So it might just be harder for you to catch fish due to the AI just kind of ignoring you more with this mask on. It's cool we can run around the area as Fierce Deity Link, but it really doesn't serve much of a purpose. If we try to leave here, the guy does comment about this mask. Hey! What's with that scary face, fella? If you leave here looking like that, you'll scare away any potential customers and ruin our reputation. Wait, hold up. Where'd you even come from? I ask myself every day. This form just kind of comes out of nowhere. We're all done, so give him back the fishing rod, and we can't leave here just yet. Hey, what did I just tell you? Don't leave here looking like that. Look, if you want to walk out that door, you have to do something about that spooky face of yours. So yeah, once you use the Fierce Deity form in here, you can't leave until you take the mask off. So unfortunately, you can think, oh, maybe I can run around the field now using my Fierce Deity form. Well, the game doesn't really let you do that. You know what I say to that? I don't care what you say, game. I'm gonna find a way to use the Fierce Deity anywhere. I'll show you. Alright, so we're out here on the west side of Termina Field, and now I'm gonna make my way over to this pool of water that's next to Great Bay Coast. Here, I'm actually wanting to swim in the water with Human Link and then put on my Zora's Mask in a very specific way. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to get in this body of water here, dive down, and while I'm diving, equip the Zora's Mask. Doing so, as we can see, we have a dive and swim command on our A and B buttons, but we're standing up. If we press the B button, we'll be swimming, but not really. If I press B and C left around the same time, then I will now be in a weird state where I am swimming, but not necessarily. What I tried to do is dive while taking off the Zora's Mask at the same time, which put me in a very glitchy state. Now, if I hold the A button to swim, if I angle myself just right on this wall, I can actually bounce around, as we can see. And it really doesn't seem like it does all that much, but watch now if I take off the Zora's Mask. I'm a Zora once again. I'm supposed to go back to human when I take the mask off, as demonstrated here. So utilizing this little glitch, we can actually get some weird side effects in the game. So I'm going to do it once again. So immediately, just transform back into human, I see. This glitch is a little precise on the timing, so it could take you a couple tries, as I'm showing. But if you can do this, this actually leads to some very interesting side effects. So there we go. I was just swimming onto this little bump on the wall here, and I was rolling around. So now I'm just walking in place, which really doesn't mean much. But normally, when you pause the game and try to swap a mask on another mask slot, you're not allowed. But in this case, I just put the Fierce Deity's mask over the Zora's mask. And notice how the Fierce Deity's mask is lit up. So now, if I press the C button that had the Zora's mask originally, I transform into Fierce Deity Link. This here is the Fierce Deity Anywhere glitch. Basically, utilizing this glitch, as the name implies, we can be Fierce Deity Link wherever we want in the game. It allows us to do some things we're not supposed to be able to do. Like we can now fight enemies with our sword beams, or not. So yeah, that's a weird caveat to this. Enemies were never designed for Fierce Deity to fight against, so because of that, enemies can't be killed with the sword beam. In fact, they ignore it altogether. You have to utilize the actual sword swings to kill enemies. There's no way around it. But you can still interact with objects here with Fierce Deity. So I can come over to this Gossip Zone and I can check it out. And I can still read things with this mask equipped. And I can also slash this to still get the time of day. And there we go, 67 hours remaining. I can still interact with things, if you can tell on that front. I can even open treasure chests and get items. So I can kind of still just do whatever I want with Fierce Deity. But he's such a tall boy. Like you can see, the camera is very high up there. So we can do some things we're not allowed to do normally here in the game. Like for example, if we go over to Milk Road, we can actually just bypass an obstacle here altogether. So on day 1 and day 2, there's this giant boulder outside of the Milk Road entrance, so we can't get into Romani's ranch. Normally, we have to blow this thing up. But Fierce Deity doesn't care. He's also much taller than this human. Very tall, in fact. The guy comes up to around my waist side. But yeah, this guy says he will move this boulder quickly, and that's a lie. It takes him 2 days. So Fierce Deity can just grab this wall here and climb up. And now I can just run around this boulder, and I'm in Romani's ranch. Easy as that. With how tall Fierce Deity is, he can get into areas that were never designed for Fierce Deity to get into in general, which kind of does break the game. In fact, that's not the only area in the game that can break with Fierce Deity Link. Alright, so now we're here in South Clocktown, and for starters, that may look small, but not for Fierce Deity Link. We can climb up to this under construction pillar, and we can talk to people and still get some dialogue here. But that's not all. This dog here treats us normally. In any other transformation, this dog will react differently, but this dog sees us as a human, so it just kind of plays around with us at the most and ignores us at the least, which is good. We don't really want the dog attacking us like a Deku Scrub. But in the laundry pool, we can actually climb this wall that Fierce Deity can just grab on his own. We can grab this as a Zora using a side hop, but as a Fierce Deity, he don't care. He can just grab it. So yeah, you can utilize this to actually get into the Curiosity Shop's back entrance pretty early if you want. There's not very much of a reason to do this, but it is something you could do if so inclined. Some side hops here on the edge. Sword slash into the door, and there you go. Now we're inside of Cafe's little hut here. I mean, obviously coming here on day 1 is useless because no one's home, so let's just leave. Notice how when Fierce Deity opened the door, his legs went through the ground. Fierce Deity was never designed to actually go through doors, and it's pretty obvious. But, yeah, Fierce Deity in Clocktown is a weird oddity. Again, the game was never designed for you to be able to do something like this, so there's a lot of game-breaking stuff here. For example, we can go into Stock Bot Inn, and once we enter, we can never leave. Fierce Deity is too tall to actually leave this door. I know it doesn't look like it, but he is. Fierce Deity just can't open the door. I mean, this guy will. But Fierce Deity can't follow. So, we can't follow someone out, and the doors, yeah, they just don't work. Which is unfortunate. Again, kind of a game-breaking thing, but never designed to be used in this said situation, and you can definitely tell. Although, we can see we have no sword here, but we can still have the glowing effect while holding down Z. So, that's a problem. So, yeah, this isn't good. So another problem here with Fierce Deity is that if we try to go to a guard, we can talk to him, he will stop us because it's not very safe to go outside, but he recognizes we have a sword, which is great, so then he's gonna let us through. Except not really. These guys know you have a sword and grant you permission to go, but they actually don't permit you permission to leave the area. It's weird and confusing, but yeah, you're kind of trapped. We can't leave. So once you enter this area, you're stuck in Clocktown, just flat out. And we can't use any other item as Fierce Deity. All of our items are blacked out except for bottles. And also the Fierce Deity Mask itself, but because we're not in the boss room, the game doesn't let us unequip the mask. So we can't unequip it, we can't use our Ocarina to warp out of here, even play the Song of Time to go back in time. We're just stuck. And that's not the only problem. If we talk to a bomber kid, the game just flat out soft locks. The bombers never have text that can be utilized for Fierce Deity. So if Fierce Deity tries to talk to a bomber kid, the game never loads any data for this and just flat out freezes on the situation. As we can see, things are still moving around, but I have no control over anything. I am stuck. So if you use Fierce Deity anywhere, he has a major set of limitations, so you really can't use him anywhere. But this glitch doesn't just work in the N64 version, it also works in the 3DS version of the game as well. We can't really do the same Fierce Deity Anywhere glitch that the N64 game utilizes because, simply put, transforming into a Zora in the water and getting yourself stuck, that kind of process just doesn't exist here in this version of the game. But there is another way that we can use the Fierce Deity Anywhere. I want to go ahead and use our first-person view here to kind of manipulate the game in a weird way. If I go to my mask screen now, I'm going to go ahead and select the Fierce Deity's mask here, and I'll equip it to my Y button. Now notice if you look at the bottom screen, it's still highlighted. But as soon as I go out of my first person view, it goes away. And if I go back in first person, it's still grayed out. So I think at this point you're kind of seeing what's going on here. If we can put something over a button slot that we can use, and then equip the Fierce Deity's mask, then we're able to use it. So if I press L and Y immediately afterwards, I'll be able to equip my Fierce Deity's mask and transform in an area that the game restricts access. So yes, the Fierce Deity form can be used anywhere in the 3DS version as well as in the N64 version. The process is different because we have to basically use an item restriction glitch to kind of bypass the game's restriction on any of the items, which includes the Fierce Deity's mask. Doing this, as we can tell, gives us a lot of the same results as using Fierce Deity in Clocktown in the N64 version, pretty much anything else. So we can't leave the town because the guards do recognize we have a sword, but then when you're done talking, they still kind of block the way. Fierce Deity is still tall enough to grab areas that you're not able to get to normally, and he can still grab any kind of treasure chest here and collect items. But yeah, this form isn't really that useful outside of very specific things. But there are other things to mention here too. I want to go ahead and make my way over to East Clocktown here, and I want to find a bomber kid to talk to. Oh, a Goron! Do you live in the mountains? Yes, kid. Definitely a Goron. This humanoid-looking person is definitely a Goron. So, yeah, for some reason, when you wear the Fierce Deity Mask and talk to bomber kids here, they recognize you as a Goron? Which definitely is not true. You're not a Goron in this form. You're definitely a humanoid demon-looking thing. So, I don't know where they're getting Goron from, but yeah, that's interesting. We don't softlock with the bomber kids now. Kind of. Certain bomber kids, when you talk to, can still softlock the game. Talk to the one here to get into the sewer system. It freezes on the scram text message. Even though the game looks like I can continue dialogue here by pressing a button, I'm pressing all the buttons right now and nothing's happening. So unfortunately, the game has softlocked. And this is not the only bomber that does this. Coming into North Clocktown, we have the leader of the bomber kids here. And if we talk to him, we get stuck in the same kind of softlock state that we did in the N64 version taught to any of the other bomber kids. So, because the leader here doesn't have text when addressing Fierce Deity Link, the game never loads up any dialogue, putting us in this forever limbo state, just like in the N64 version. So I just recommend don't talk to any of the bomber kids here wearing the Fierce Deity's mask. Since they weren't really properly programmed to interact with Fierce Deity Link, the most you're going to get out of the situation is a good chuckle of them calling you a Goron, and the worst case scenario is a softlock. Let's say at this point you're done using the Fierce Deity Link form. In the N64 version, the only way we could have transformed back into human Link is to find a pool of water, which would activate our Zora mask, and we transform into our Zora back into human Link. Well, in the 3DS version, this is kind of a weird quirk, but it is a quirk we can take advantage of. We can use any of our other transformation masks at this point to transform out of Fierce Deity Link. So now we just put out a Goron form, and from here, we can transform back into a human. So the game doesn't lock us into Fierce Deity unless we find a body of water here. We can use any of the transformation masks at will, no matter where we're at, and because of this, we can get out of our Fierce Deity form and turn back into a human. I guess one more thing to mention about the Fierce Deity form here in the 3DS version is that we can't use the sword beams against anything just like in the N64 version. So basically the Fierce Deity form is kind of used in the same way here as it was in the N64 game. So at this point I'm actually going to make my way back over to the swamp fishing hole here and demonstrate that once we enter the area we can go ahead and take off the mask there and also return to a human form. But that's pretty much it. The Fierce Deity Anywhere glitch, no matter if you're playing N64 or the 3DS versions of this game, does produce some interesting results, but it's not really all that necessary. In fact, here's an interesting result. I clipped through the floor when trying to open a door. And also, this guy recognizes immediately when I walk in that I'm trying to leave. This is the same text we got from trying to leave the area with the Fierce Deity mask on. So, that's a little weird, but yeah. That's pretty much everything. At this point, we can take off our mask, and we can re-equip it here if we want to, but that is the Fierce Deity Link form. And that's demonstrating how this form works in all the bosses in the game, along with a glitch allowing you to use it anywhere in Majora's Mask. But with that said, that's going to do it for today's episode, so thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.